And joining me now to discuss this and the big news stories of the day is New South Wales Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg. Great to see you, Andrew. And Labor MP Andrew Charlton. Thanks for being here in the studio. Andrew, I just want to start with getting your reaction to what we've seen today. Just historic, unprecedented, and for the first time we saw the case against Trump. What's your view on it?
Well, I think whatever your view on Donald Trump, whatever your view on the legal merits of this case, it is a sad day for the United States. I grew up when the US president was a symbol of dignity and honour around the world. And whatever your view about this case, the images and the facts are unedifying. So it's a sad day, I think, for American democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew Bragg, what did you think? I mean, we have had a chance to look at the actual detail of the indictment, the seal lifted for the first time. Do you think there is enough in this case to see Trump land in prison?
Sharri, I'm not a commentator on foreign politics, so I'm not going to wade into this one, but I would agree with Andrew that unfortunately there have been too many times in the past few years where the office has been degraded, that is the office of President of the United States, and no one wants to see that happen. So, but I wish my American friends well, and I won't be interfering in their judicial activities.
No, fair enough, although I think an opinion wouldn't amount to interference, but these days, with Trump accused of interference, who knows? Look, let's get back to some other domestic stories. Andrew Charlton, we saw the RBA yesterday keep the rates on hold. This is after 10 consecutive rate rises. You've been on this program previously saying that the RBA shouldn't change its monetary policy to respond to, say, volatile markets, and it should have a macro view. If its task is to deal with inflation, then it should stick to that. Do you still hold that view, and therefore do you disagree with the decision yesterday to keep rates on hold?
Look, I still hold that view. I think the reason the RBA put rates on hold is they're waiting to see what the macro data says. Look, it's good news that rates didn't go up this week, but we have to remember that for many Australians, this isn't the end of the pain. In fact, for many Australians, the real pain hasn't even begun. They are people who are on ultra-low fixed rates that are about to flip into variable rates, and they will see their interest go up from something like 2% to something like 5% over the course of the next 6 months. So one of the reasons why the RBA is pausing is to wait and see the effect of that significant increase that is yet to hit many Australian families.
And you think that we will still ultimately need more rate rises to get us back to the target inflation of between 2 to 3 or 2 to 4%?
Well, the Governor was pretty clear about that in his speech today. He said it is much more likely than otherwise that we'll have more rate increases. And the purpose of the rate pause is to wait and see how the economy develops. So it's very much pushing pause, not pushing stop on the rate increases, unfortunately.
What's your view on this, Andrew Bragg?
Well, I think it's very clear that the government in Canberra has been massively fueling inflation with its expansionary fiscal policy, and that is putting pressure on the Reserve Bank to raise interest rates. There have been 10 interest rate rises since the election when Labor came to power, and I fear that there will be more because the government in Canberra is making the Reserve Bank Governor's job so much harder, and ultimately the government should be held accountable for making lives so much harder, particularly for those of us that have mortgages.
Yeah. I think it was 9 since the election.
Can I correct that? I think it's 9
since the election. One was during the election campaign.
And one was while the Liberal government was in power.
But putting that aside, do you want to respond to Andrew Bragg's claims there that you are running an expansionary budget, and it's true that the October budget had net spending growth?
Well, the one interest rate rise that Andrew misallocated to Labor is actually a really important point because it signals the fact that this tightening cycle began when the Liberal government was in power and was the consequence of the macroeconomic conditions left by the Liberal government, including a record debt, including bottlenecks across our supply chains. And all of those factors are the reasons why inflation is high and why the RBA is increasing in interest rates now. So,
Andrew Bragg, do you want to respond to this? Do you want to jump in here?
I mean, the main point here is that the government have spent more money than they should have since the election. They've set up $45 billion in off-balance sheet items. and there's another $10 or $15 billion they've locked in through recurrent expenditure. So the government is running an expansionary fiscal policy, which is putting pressure on the Reserve Bank. That's a fact.
All right.
Well, I mean, that $45 billion of off-balance sheet expenditure, not a dollar of that has been spent. So it is a little bit unrealistic to blame those items for interest rates and inflation that are in the rearview mirror, because none of that has begun. So you'll have to find another culprit to blame for these interest rate rises, and you might not have to look too far away.
Well, the IMF is disagreeing with you. They've warned about the presence of these off-balance sheet items. So.
All right, let's turn to The Voice now. The Liberal Party today came to a position on The Voice, deciding to vote no. Have a look at Peter Dutton.
Well, the Liberal Party resolved today to say yes to constitutional recognition for Indigenous Australians, yes to a local and regional body so that we can get practical outcomes for Indigenous people on the ground. But there was a resounding no to the Prime Minister's Canberra Voice. It should be very clear to Australians by now that the Prime Minister is dividing our country, and the Liberal Party seeks to unite our country.
Andrew Bragg, are you disappointed in this result that your party has come to?
Well, firstly, I've just added an umbrella to my repertoire here. Look, the point here, I think, is that the party has come to a position. It's not a position that will be binding on everyone. And I'm a member of the committee which is going to review the proposed amendment to the Constitution. And I'll be doing that with a view to try and ensure that we can get the best set of words to put to the Australian people, which increases Indigenous capability in community to make judgments about people's lives, but also that it is a set of words which is safe for our institutional framework in Australia.
But you must be disappointed. You're a strong yes campaigner. Your party is now going to campaign no ahead of the referendum later this year.
Well, it's not a position that's going to be binding on all the members of the party room. So, I mean, I'll be free to try and improve the bill and the amendment to the Constitution which has been proposed through the committee that I'm sitting on, which reports back in 5 weeks. And then beyond that, let's see where it gets to. But we've never been a party which has stopped people from expressing their own personal views, and that's what's happened today.
All right, very quickly, Andrew Charlton, will this make it harder for Anthony Albanese to win, to get his yes vote through at the referendum? Well,
of course we would have preferred bipartisanship, but the truth here is that Peter Dutton is stoking fear of change, when the real fear, the fear that most Australians have, is the fear that things will stay the same for Indigenous Australians, that we'll continue to have high incarceration rates, a big gap in life expectancy and gap in education outcomes. That's the real risk for Australians, and that's why it's important that we support the Voice to Parliament.
All right, Andrew Charlton and Andrew Bragg, great to have you with me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And coming up, more on Donald Trump's historic indictment. We've got New York Post